The following is a presentation that was made by Hall Martin of the Texas Entrepreneurs Networks in May of 2014 to the Innovation Week Conference, sponsored by People Fund. The topic that was discussed is crowdfunding, how to use the Texas Entrepreneur Network's funding portal for your campaign. And he's going to discuss crowdfunding campaigns, including how to prepare for the campaign and how to execute it.
Thank you guys for joining us today. My name is Hall Martin. I'm with the Texas Entrepreneur Network, and I want to talk today about crowdfunding and what it is and how it works, and talk about some of the things you might want to consider in going to do it. So the agenda is a little bit heavy, so I just kind of want to start moving into it. We're going to talk about what is crowdfunding, how it works, and we're taking a very broad view of crowdfunding. It's not just Kickstarter, it's not just equity raises. We're going to talk a little bit about all of it if we can. Talk about the different models, and there's a new intrastate crowdfunding law coming out for Texas. So we'll talk about that here in a minute, but it's going to let anybody here with a Texas company raise up to $5,000 of equity investment from anybody in Texas. And so for some deals, if you have a large number of non-accredited investors, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, it's a great way to raise money. Come on in. We're just kicking off. And we'll talk about the elements of a crowdfunding campaign, what you need to do. And we'll talk about the pitch video, how you might make one and what the importance of it. Talk about campaign planning, because you're running a campaign with crowdfunding. You know, people put this up on the website and they think it's going to go viral automatically, and let me tell you, nothing happens automatically. It all comes from you. And then we'll talk about the 5 most common mistakes, and then along the way we'll take some Q&A as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and kick off. So basically, crowdfunding is sourcing funds for a startup through the website. And that's a very, very broad expansion of it. And it's a new source of capital. And what you'll find is that you're going to be able to get more funding, but they're going to be smaller amounts of funding from each group or individual. But now you have a larger number of people to go to. It used to be if you wanted to raise $100,000, you go to 5 family members and get $20K each. Now you're going to go to the crowd, and you're going to get 100 people putting in $1K each. And so the dynamics change a little bit as you go on the website, as you have to deal with a larger number of people, but typically the amount you're going to raise will be smaller from each of those. And there's nothing wrong with having 20K checks from family members and a lot of 1K checks. Crowdfunding work. There's many, many portals out there now. We have a portal, but last I checked with crowdsourcing.org. If you want a resource, go check out. Go to crowdsourcing.org. And that's the community or the industry website for crowdfunding. And they catalog, and they're up to about 2,600 crowdfunding portals in the U.S. right now. And there's some European ones in there as well. And the way it works is you go and you submit an application, fill out a little form. You get approved to go, and then you basically launch your campaign. You promote your deal to your network, get your people putting money in. The rule of thumb is that when you put a campaign launch out there, the first 20 to 30% of the money needs to go in on the first couple of days from your network. And you have to have that set up before you launch the campaign. And then as you go through the campaign period, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, there's typically the size of these campaigns. You respond to the questions and the feedback while you continue to promote it out to your network. And then you raise your funds, and then you close it out. So remember, you're running a campaign. People often come into our website. We've been doing crowdfund for over a year on equity deals. They put the deal up there, and the common misconception is, well, I'm done. I put it up on the web. I'm good. And they want to come back 30 days later to pick up the money. And let me tell you, that's not how it works. You're out shopping it, getting people interested, and so forth, almost on a daily basis. Now, I said before, we're taking a very expansive view of crowdfunding. People mostly, when I say what is crowdfunding, they'll talk about Kickstarter. And that's very popular and so forth. It's what it's called rewards or prepayment. I mean, they're going to give somebody a reward for putting money in, or they're actually prepaying for a product or service that I want to build. And this is a great way for consumer products and some other groups to get money as they go out and they can get 20, 30 people to prepay for that product. They'll have the money to go build that first round of product and prove that there's a market for it. There's also equity crowdfunding, and traditionally equity crowdfunding was done with accredited investors. How many people know what an accredited investor is? Oh, about half of you. An accredited investor is someone that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, says you're an investor that can invest in risky startups. And the rule of thumb is there's about 10 different ways you can become accredited investors, but mostly it's those who have $1 million in net worth, not counting the house they live in. That's one of the main rules. And we have over 600 accredited investors on our database, and the crowdfunding we've been doing this past 12 months have been to these accredited investors. And I would take a deal in, I would email only to those accredited investors, they would express interest, and we put them in touch with the entrepreneur. What's coming up now is what's called the Intrastate, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, where most people have heard about the Jobs Act, Jumpstart Our Business Startup Act, that the SEC is putting together. And right now it is in the last probably 9 to 12 months of implementation. They've been talking about this for 3 or 4 years. And it's going through the process now where the SEC is implementing the Jobs Act on the national level through FINRA and all of its organizations. And this time next year, it should be law. It should be out there. And it's good. It lets non-accredited investors start to invest in startups. It lets small startups raise money without doing a lot of the paperwork. But when you look at the laws, it's still fairly expensive to do. And so what you're finding now is that many states, Texas will be the 9th, but there's been 8 states already that have passed their own intrastate law that will do the same thing. Non-accredited investors can invest in startups for equity, but they don't have to do as much paperwork as the SEC law will say they have to do. And we'll talk about that here in a second. The 2 other kinds of crowdfunding are donations. I'm just raising money for a good cause. Or what's called peer-to-peer lending. I'm raising money, but it's really a loan as opposed to equity investment or a gift. So let's talk about that intrastate law. The state of Texas, or rather the Securities Board at the state of Texas, have proposed the rules and regulations for how this is going to work, and they're now in a 60-day comment period. These rules are expected to hit the streets in final form in August of this year or September. And what it does is it lets non-accredited investors invest in startups for equity in the company itself. So the rule is that any person in Texas, you're a resident of Texas, can invest up to $5,000 per person per year in a startup, and you can get an equity stake in that company. The startup must be based in Texas. 80% of the assets and 80% of the revenue of that company have to be in Texas to qualify for this. And what we have to do is, that startup can raise up to $1 million, but they don't have to have audited financials. All they have to do is have the CEO certified. This is one of the big problems with the SEC Jobs Act is that their rule says if you're raising up to $1 million, the company has to go get audited financials. Well, that's $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 just to go audit financials, which may be very, very, very simple. And so the Texas law, along with the other 8 states that have done this already, are simply trying to reduce the cost of doing business. States like Georgia, Kansas, Maine, Washington State, North Carolina have already passed their laws. Indiana, Alabama, and many others are not too far behind. And Texas will pass its one very soon. The key with an intrastate law is that you have to go through a registered Texas crowdfunding portal. And so Texas Entrepreneur Network plans to become one of those. They have to finalize the laws. All we have to do is fill out a fairly simple 2-page form, pay a nominal filing fee. We don't have to register as a broker-dealer. It's very simple to do. They do want to do background checks so that we don't have criminals running crowdfunding portals and so forth. So they'll put that together as well. But the key is when you're running a campaign, all communication about your deal has to be on that portal. And all investors have to see the same information. So the way this will work when it gets implemented is if you want to invest in that deal, you have to log in and put in things like your driver's license number or your voter registration, and then we'll check to make sure you're a Texas resident. Then you get to come in and you get to look at the offer, what's there. Any comments or questions that have been posted and answered will be there for everybody else to see. And all of it has to be in one place. So you really can't go out to Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, social media and just say, here's my deal, here's the answer to your question. You can't do broad-based exposure like that for it. In fact, it's very difficult to use social media with intrastate crowdfunding because social media goes beyond Texas. What you can do is use social media to get people to come to the portal, and that's what we'll do. But then when they get there inside, once they go inside the portal, look at your deal, well, now you can have your own marketing and updates to those who have come in to look at your deal as well. So we'll work all that out, but basically it opens up a lot more money. When I go talk to people, well, I will just tell you, we have 600 accredited investors on our database. We have 13,000 non-accredited investors on our database. So our ability to market this out to a broader group of people is greatly enhanced. Many people have deals where they have a lot of non-accredited investors in their network. And so they get to now leverage that into this system as well. It's in proposal format now, and so I actually have a copy because we had a meeting with the State Securities Board last week, and they've given us the 2-page form to look at, and it's going to be all packaged together. And in July, when they finalize it, that form will become available. We can go through the process of signing up for that, filling it out, and go through it. So it's coming too, just like everything else. Cool. Yes?
How tight or loosely defined is a startup in this scenario?
It's very loosely defined. It can be an existing company. You can be an up-and-running mature company and so forth. It can be any entity in the state of Texas. The amount of money you're gaining, 5K chunks, tends to make it more interesting to the early stage than to the later stage, but you could use it for that as well. If you want to use the federal laws, you can always use that at any time. If you want to use the Texas law, you can use that at any time after they've been passed. The key is if you want to take money outside of Texas, you would now be under the federal law. If you wanted to raise just money in Texas, it doesn't matter what the federal law does at that point. And Texas is a big enough state. You could probably find most of your money. 90% of what gets funded is usually funded in your local community anyway. It's rare that it goes outside of the community itself. Well, let's back up one. So let's talk about a crowdfunding campaign. There are several elements you need to put in a crowdfunding campaign if you're launching one. First is, and most important, we'll talk about that here more in a minute, is a pitch video. Those who have a 2 or 3 minute video on their website or on our crowdfunding portal for their deal get twice the click-through rate as those that do not. Investors, when they come to this, they just want to hit the play button and have you tell them what you're doing. They're not going to go through all the verbiage and try to figure it out. And it's very important. And we'll talk more about the pitch video in a second. Second is you have a 250-word description or something thereabout that describes what you're doing. Third is you need to put up there a short bio of the team. Who is the team? Who is leading this? Because in the end, they're not investing in your product, they're investing in you. And they want to make sure you do it. But it's important to put the bio up there. Fourth is you need a funds target and a funds timeline. Now, we're not Kickstarter. We're not going to say you have to do it in this time or this time or this time. But it's really important to know that after 30 or 60 days, you're going to get tired of fundraising, and your network is going to get tired of fundraising. And so you really have a 30, 60, or 90-day window in which to do this. And at that point, it'll be time to go do something else. And one thing you may want to think about, and we'll talk more about in a few minutes, is breaking big campaigns down into smaller mini campaigns. Instead of having one $5 million goal, let's have a $250,000 goal and do it now. 6 months later, let's go do a $500,000 raise and so forth. So you can break these things down into smaller pieces. What's really important is to have updates and news to put in along the way. Because as you start to go out to the network and tell them about your deal, they want to know how things are going. And every week you have to have something new. And this is what campaign planning is really all about. It's really about coming up with a series of updates, reports, and good news that you can put out there. So why make a pitch video? Number one, pitch sessions are moving online. We used to have funding forums around Austin. We come out. In fact, I'm still doing some now, but more and more they're going online because people want to. Well, it's just a lot of time to go out to a facility and see 5 or 10 companies stand up and pitch for funding. They want to sit at the desk and comb through and see the deals up front that way. And investors want to know what you're doing, and they're not going to really follow you until they understand who you are and what you're doing as well. And like I said, there's a 2x click-through rate on pitch video deals without pitch video. And the two things you want to do is, in less than a minute, the average watch time on our videos is 1 minute and 57 seconds. So I often get people giving me 45-minute, 60-minute videos, and I tell them, well, I hope you sold all the good stuff in the first 2 minutes because that's all they're going to watch. So give me a 2-hour video, no problem. They're not going to watch it. And so we have to think about the video schema. And if you're in the investor's seat, you just have 50 things you have to do before you go out the door today, and so they're clicking through their list of things to do, and you have to make it easy for them to get through your deal as well. The other thing, aside from telling them what you do, is you're demonstrating your credibility. So when you do a video, it should be of you, the team leader, telling them what you're doing and demonstrating that you're a credible person. You know what you're talking about, you have the plan together, you have the team together, you can get this done. And without that, we get a lot of videos that are really just product demos. Here, let me show what the product does. Well, that's about half the story. The other half is who's running this and do we think you're going to get there. So when you do these videos, you show yourself. And make sure you introduce your name, your position, who the company is. Show the product and concept so people get it. As if you're doing an equity raise in this company, talk about your competitive advantage. How are you better than other people? Talk about your target market, if there's any intellectual property in the deal as well, and talk about the rest of the team. So fill it out a little bit. Don't just tell us what the product does. Tell us about all the other values in the business. The rule of pitching is if you don't articulate it or mention it, it doesn't exist. So if I have revenue and I don't say anything about it, the investor goes away thinking, oh, they don't have any revenue. They didn't mention it. And it doesn't take that much time to mention these things. And then what you want to do is talk about how much funding you're going to raise and what you're going to do with the funding. And people are going to start to see if that's a credible, realistic business plan as well. And close out with a call to action. What do you want them to do? You want them to learn more? You want them to invest? You want them to go to a meeting? Whatever the call to action is, you put that call out there as well. So the key with the video, as I said before, keep it short. 2 to 3 minutes is all people are going to spend on it. Open it with an attention-getting line. Make sure you have some passion, enthusiasm for it. Some investors are looking that you're really excited about this project and it's something you really want to do. Most people think that the issue of video is the visual. It's really not. It's the audio. Most people are used to watching grainy YouTube videos on a small screen, and so the video quality, as long as you can see what's going on, is good. If it's good enough, it's good enough. But what they really want, and what will knock you out very quickly, is if you don't have very good, high-quality audio. You need lavalier mics, you need high def, you need no distracting noises off to the side, because if they can't hear very well, they're going to drop out very quickly and not listen to more of it, such as this microphone here. And then make sure you're away from a distracting background or noise as well. So in your description, a couple of things you want to do is create a 5-word tagline, because that's usually what goes up on the headline of your deck or your placement on the website. And so it's got to be 5 words of something about what you do. Second, use compelling headlines in your description. Show why this is of interest as well. And like I said before, you'll have about 250 words, so you want to make good use of those words. Take out all the filler and start putting in more descriptive words about what your deal is doing. Again, people have more and more deals to go through, so you got to get as much out of their time with your deal as you can. In the 250-word description, you can cover what it does, why it's important, how you're going to accomplish it, when and where, what's unique about it, and how much funding is required. So you're really getting down to the heart of what your deal is to get them interested in it. With the biography, what you want to do is do a 50 to 100-word description of you and the team, just so people get a sense that you're an experienced group, you know what you're doing, and you're bringing a lot of enthusiasm and passion to it and capability. The other thing you want to do is make sure that your digital footprint supports it. When people are trying to do research on the team online, what they're doing is going out to your Facebook page, Twitter, and LinkedIn account, and they're trying to figure out, is this is an expert, or does the digital footprint support that? And that's how they'll do initial due diligence. And oftentimes people rewrite their Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter pages to support what the campaign is. Some create websites and create blogs with some content to demonstrate that I'm an expert in this as well. You need a fundraise and target and timeline. The key here is you need to raise at least 20% of your target before you ever launch the campaign. You've gone to family, friends, and others in their network, and they've said, yes, I'll put in X. And you tell them, okay, on day 2, I need you to put in X. And you need to have at least 20% of your raise confirmed before you ever even launch the campaign as well. Set a campaign that lasts 30, 60, or 90 days. It's very intense. It takes a lot of your time. And the reality is, after 30 days, if you're not making progress, your investor and fan base is going to leap away. They're going to want to see progress in 30 days. So you have to have traction on the fundraise and the company as well. Like I said before, consider breaking big campaigns into many smaller ones that you can get people excited about. And you can use different models. I have groups coming in that are using donations for a portion of what they're doing. I'm helping a makerspace in Houston raise money and equipment for what they're doing. So we're going to use the donations model for some elements. We need a laser etch machine. We need money or the equipment itself. We have a for-profit that's offering courses, so we're going to be using Intrastate Law to raise money for that profit side of that business. And you can use other campaigns along the way to make it work. It doesn't have to be just one campaign, one way, we're done forever. Here's the really critical piece is when you do a campaign, you need to lay out all the different good news or things that are going to happen and have something new to say every 5 to 7 days. There's something happening with the team or the product or whatever. You need to have a plan for how you're going to come up with news or things that are happening with what you're doing. What you're trying to do is create a sense of momentum. I help people raise funding from angels all the time. And it's really a matter of just trying to create a sense of momentum. This business is taking off. They're getting more downloads, we're getting more investors, we're getting more sales, and things are just building up at a very rapid pace. And when investors feel that sense of momentum, they jump on board. And that's what you're trying to do. And then you want to demonstrate the traction you have with customers, even if they're not paying customers. If they're downloading, if they're using, if they're trying things out, that's what you want to capture into this as well. So in a campaign plan, you really need to start about 3 months before launch to start planning, because this takes a lot of time to go line up your network, get people convinced, and so forth into it. If you wait till the campaign launches to go do this, it's probably not going to work, because 30, 60 days goes by so fast that you're going to need more time to prepare for it. But typically, pre-campaign, 3 months, run a 30 to 90-day campaign, and then you'll need another month afterwards in your schedule just to do the follow-up that goes into it. So in the pre-campaign, you prepare your materials. Like I said before, set up your digital footprint so you're the expert in this area. Blog, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. Create the pitch video, the 250-word descriptions. A lot of videographers around. You can do your own video as well. A lot of people do their own pitch videos out there. Develop an exec summary and a pitch deck. What happens is people come in and they like what you've done with the pitch video, they're interested, and they say, hey, I'm interested to learn more. What you want to do is have a set of documents to send them after they said, yes, I'm interested. Let me give you, for equity, give me an executive summary, 1-page description of the business. They like what they see. Tell me more, but now you send them the pitch deck and walk them through it over the phone or in person if you can. So you're getting them more information and getting them deeper into the deal with this. Next is prepare your network. You have a core network of family, friends, co-workers, colleagues, people you know, and you're trying to get those guys excited. They, in turn, have friends of friends that might be able to engage in your project as well. What you want to do is set up a mailing schedule. Every week, a new mailing. There's some new information. Now, the fundraise is easy because that should be clicking up at a regular rate. Customers, at some level, should be clicking up at a regular rate. If you have an up-and-running business, it's even more compelling because here's something that's we can invest in as opposed to it's an idea. It's harder to do with just an idea. And then you can always identify broader media targets that are out there. So if you're getting traction in your crowdfund campaign, you can go to newspapers and so forth to do it. We have a tool on our website in the resources and planning area that says it's called Crowd Builder. You go in, say, here's the kind of campaign I'm running, the kind of product I'm doing. and they'll give you a list of 75 press contacts at New York Times, Wall Street Journal, whatever. So if you're getting good traction in the campaign, you go to them and say, hey, I'm doing a cool idea. And they're always looking for things that are getting traction out there as well. And you can take your campaign to the next level outside there as well. So, like I said before, in the updates, you need to develop a news plan. So what you need is updates on these 4 things: product developments, team, fundraise, and the customer traction. Now, you can talk about the size of the market or the growth of the market or how a competitor fell down, but those are usually less compelling. And the reason they're less compelling is because the investor at this stage wants to know what you're doing. They want to know what you're accomplishing, what's coming from your area. And these 4 things are usually in your wheelhouse. That's what you're in control of. And if anything happening in there is great stuff. Intellectual property would be in there as well. But fundamentally, we're developing a product, building a team, having investors sign on, and we're getting sales. And to the extent you can talk about those things, you can actually get it. And then with the first 20%, you should be off to a good start. When you run the campaign, it's a full-time job. Boy, you are not doing much of anything else because you are sending out updates. You're going back trying to get more people to go into it. You're just following this thing up. You will be getting a lot of feedback. A lot of people emailing back saying, well, I have a question about this, I have a question about that, and you have to follow up very promptly with it. And then you have to monitor the campaign mailings. Typically, you set up 4 or 5 or 6 other groups to mail out for you at a prescribed time. You mail out to your database, and eventually that runs out. Now you're mailing to my database. I run a crowdfunding portal in Williamson County. If you live in Williamson County, you can mail out to the Williamson County database. You might be able to get groups like People Fund or others to mail out to their database. And so you're monitoring all of those mailings and scheduling them so that they're hitting at different times so you can actually engage new people into what you're doing. Along the way, you'll get feedback about your product or your pitch or your program, and you can adjust it. Most people have changed what they are doing for a product or how they're presenting it based on the campaign itself and how it's working. As Eisenhower once said, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. So if it changes along the way a little bit, that's to be expected. And that's one of the benefits of a crowdfunding campaign is you're getting a lot more feedback about what you're doing. And when you get that feedback, you make a better product, you make a better approach in there as well. And then in the post-campaign, what you have to do is go back and fulfill any promises made. If you are doing equity, you have to wrap up the equity documents, get people to sign those, get the money out of escrow, finalize documents, and then thank everybody in your network who did the mailings and who supported you. Because, like I said before, this is probably not going to be your last campaign. This is going to be one of many campaigns, and you want to go back and show those people that helped you, this worked great, you supported me, we now have a successful business up and running or funding coming in, and then you go back to those guys for a future campaign, they'll be much more likely to help you as well. So let's talk about the 5 most common mistakes, and then we'll answer any questions people have. So the first one is that we see is that people don't make the pitch compelling enough. It really has to be a great business. It really has to serve the community or the customers in a great way. So you want a great team doing something great. If it's a mediocre project, people see through that in a heartbeat. It's got to be really passionate about what you're doing. Next is not promoting the raise, and this is one of the most common things we see. People put up on the website, then they get busy for 3 weeks, and then next thing you know, the month is gone, and people aren't seeing any traction, and so you're not getting that momentum build-up out of it as well. So you need to leverage your social network to expand and then run a broader PR campaign and think about what has to be done, when to get there for it. The third one is not demonstrating a detailed plan. If you're raising money to do a certain project, oftentimes the investor is going to email you saying, show me the detailed plan of how you're going to use that $50K, $100K, $200K. And they're going to be looking as to how well thought out is this plan. If it's very general, $30K for salaries, it doesn't really convince them. What they really want to know is what's going to be spent on what value in the business. And you have to have that. Fourth is not asking for realistic amounts of money. Some plans just don't seem like they're going to get where you're going to go, and people don't want to support that. They want to know that there's a reasonable chance of success. If you raise this money, you're going to accomplish this goal as well. And then if you ask for too much, then people think you might be, again, not mastering the project at hand, and so they don't want to support that as well. And then the fifth one is not responding to the questions or taking feedback. Sometimes people will say, I will invest, but you need to do this, because they feel like you're missing something. And you have to be what's called coachable in the investor's world, which means you're open to it, you're going to take it in, you're going to work with it. It doesn't mean you throw your whole business plan out the window, but you do need to be open to investor feedback, because some will want to see changes in the plan before they go forward with it. So let's stop there and ask, what questions do people have at this point about any of this stuff? Yes?
Is there a place to go and look at other people's campaigns and see some of the things that work for them when starting to crowdfund?
The non-accredited investor stuff is very easy to see. The Kickstarter, the Indiegogos, and the Rocket Hubs are a great way to go and find what other people put up on their site, look at pitch videos, see how they presented stuff, and so forth. When we get to the Intrastate Crowdfunding Law, now you can log on and look at other people's campaigns, because you're in the state of Texas, you're a potential investor. You can look at this and get a much bigger sampling that is out there as well for what you're doing. So I think there's plenty of content on the website right now. Some of the accredited investor stuff that's out there today, you have to be an accredited investor to look at it, and it's not quite available. Although what I see is that the stuff seems to be fairly well disseminated anyway. Even though it's supposed to be kept secret, it's kind of out there to a large extent.
I'm a little unclear on the equity part. How does that actually work?
Well, the way the crowdfunding works for equity today, especially with Intrastate, is that you're getting the investor and the entrepreneur together online, and then offline, you're doing the actual financial transaction. If you were to take money through the Intrastate crowdfunding, the money has to go into an escrow account. So an entrepreneur says, I want to put $5K in. That money doesn't go to you, it goes to an escrow. And when you reach the minimum amount that's required for that raise, I'm raising $500,000, the minimum is $300,000. I can't touch the money if I'm raising it until I hit $300K. The money has to sit in escrow until I hit $300K, and then I get the money out. Typically, for those raises, you've already got all of the offering documents made up. But this much money is going to get the investor this much equity. And here are the terms for information and all the usual things that go into it. Typically, that's pre-planned before you go out there, which is one reason why you go to your network first and get the first 20K in, is that they can help you figure out what those terms might be and what might be investor-friendly terms. In the angel world, it's nobody wants to be first as an investor. So as an entrepreneur, I have to go get somebody, usually family and friends, to invest in my deal first. And then when I go to people that aren't in my inner circle, they're looking at money's already in, terms are already set, here's the deal, other people have led the way, and it's more easy for people to join on board in that case as well. So if you're interested, we have a funding portal out there. Just like everybody else, you go submit an application. What we'll do is go and talk to you about the fundraise strategy, because what used to be we were just doing rewards. Well, now we're doing other things, accredited investors, Intrastate, and so forth, and we want to kind of strategize a little bit about how we can raise money to get you going. And then we'll work with you to help develop a campaign. We have people that will do pitch videos, or you can do your own pitch video, but we really, really strongly recommend it. Some people have kind of skipped that in the past, and I don't think they got as much out of the experience as they could have. And then we'll launch and run the campaign for 30, 60, 90 days. That goes out there. And then finally wrapping up, crowdfunding is new ways to raise funding for your business. All these rules with the Jobs Act and with the Intrastate, what it's doing is opening up another big layer of funding that you can get access to it. When I was with the Angel Networks, helped start 3 of them, Central Texas Angel Network, the Baylor Angel Network, and the Wilco Angel Network. And I go to these conferences like the Angel Capital Association. They were the trade association for angel groups, and they had 700 groups in their program. They'd always put the stats up there in the annual meeting where angels themselves in the groups would or angels themselves would probably invest about $20 to $25 billion a year into startups. Family and friends were in the $70 to $80 billion per year. So the amount of money you get out of family and friends always was more than about 3 times as much. And what the Intrastate Law does is it lets you start to capture that in there. It's only $5K. But even today, what I find, angels used to come into the room with $50K checks, and they'd look around the room and then say, okay, you get the $50K check. Today, they're coming in with a $50K check, and now it's, okay, 10 for you, 10 for you, 10 for you, 10 for you. They're starting to spread it across more. So the difference between a intrastate investor at $5K, a traditional angel investor, is quickly closing or meeting in the middle around 5 to 10K, just because they want to try to spread the money across more deals to get a win. And then family and friends, they can put 5K in, and if it doesn't work out, well, it was only 5K. We're not going to bankrupt anybody for that. And so, so the key is the rules of fundraising have not changed. You still have to have a network. You still have to have a plan. You still have to be credible. You still have to convince people to put money in, and so forth. What's changing is the formats that we use. Instead of my standing up and giving you a 10-minute pitch, I'm now going to have a 2-minute video on your screen that you're looking at. Instead of my handing you an exec summary, I'm now going to give you 250 words, and you're going to look at that and decide if you want to learn more about this deal or not. And then you've always had to leverage your network. Well, now with an intrastate crowdfunding ruling, you get a much bigger network to leverage into an equity raise. And then you always spiral out to the broader community if you have traction with the first, in order to demonstrate that we're getting good things here. You know, we might want to be able to get a story in the newspapers and the magazines and so forth later as we go forward with it. Any other questions about it?
Yes. From your experience, what percentage or what kind of numbers do you see of not only veterans but also baby boomers, seniors going after crowdfunding? Is it something that they don't understand yet and they need help with, or is it something that they're diving into when they're starting a business or growing it?
I think everybody's diving into it and starting it and don't really fully understand the amount of work that goes into it. I think there's an educational component to it. After you do a few, you'll start to realize, oh, to be successful, I'm going to have to do these things with it. The advantage baby boomers have is they often have a good network. People can go put money in and they don't realize they've got a good network of both accredited investors and non-accredited investors who can put the 5Ks in and so forth. And so we do see people up and down the curve, people just straight out of the university all the way up to baby boomers that are starting businesses, and we're helping with that as well. So.
Okay, if a boomer, let's say, goes to the portal and they have no capital in there, an aspiring entrepreneur, then what would it take for them to get on your portal and to submit an application to get some crowdfunding? I mean, do you collect a fee or do you take a percentage or...
We charge a posting fee up front, and that's because we're not a broker-dealer. We can't take back-end fees on equity deals. And we're not taking anything on the back end of the rewards or the donations right now. And we actually have 2 portals. We have the 10 funding portal, and we have the Wilco community portal. So Williamson County, Round Rock, Georgetown, and Cedar Park came and said, we want a community portal. We want to do this on in our community. They're the fastest growing county in the U.S., and there's a lot of PR that goes with this, because you can showcase to your community, here are the companies that are starting, they want to raise funding, who wants to be a part of this? And with Intrastate, just about anybody can participate in that. And then that just, they've got a lot of great stuff going on there as well. The 10 funding portal is really meant to be for all of Texas. So anybody that wants to come in, they can raise funding on it as well. And so like I say, we just charge a posting fee to put it up there, because we are still in this learning period of what it takes to do this. So we spend a lot of time working with people on campaigns. Early days, we just take anybody that came in, put them up there. But now we're sitting down and having the real heart-to-heart. Well, you can do that, but you probably won't raise any money. Go right ahead, but you're not going to raise money because there's no pitch video, there's no campaign, there's no attitude of keeping it up to date or going out and leveraging the network as well. And so to really use crowdfunding, you do have to have access to a bigger network, not only just yours and friends, but also affinity groups. You use the dog groups and so forth. You have to go get access to those other groups. And I think boomers are a better position for that than a lot of people because they have just broader networks to begin with. So I think they'll do very well with this. I think they would have a better perspective on doing that because they've worked in other places before and they kind of know what goes into making things successful. Do it as well. And so we go through and we help them put all that planning together.
So you're basically the campaign manager for them once they get all their resources together and they got their plans done.
That's right, because we're taking all the investors that express interest and giving it to them and saying, what update are we going to put out next week? Now, sometimes they give me something and sometimes they don't. And which is why it goes back to the campaign plan. The plan really needs to be able to sit down and say, okay, well, next week I'm going to a trade show. Okay, so the week after we're going to announce the results of the trade show. Week after that we have a big closed sale with IBM. Okay, the week after that we're going to talk about the interaction with IBM. I don't have to close the sale, but I have to start talking about how we're working with IBM. We met them last week, and that counts for traction and so forth. So what we do is look at their calendar and say, what are you doing these weeks? They say, well, I'm doing this, this, this. Well, that, articulating what happened in that is the update you put in the following week for each of those things. So oftentimes people have this stuff where they're just not capturing it in a way that they can really put it out there for their deal.
So your campaign management is their fee, their hosting fee is what pays for the campaign management that you provide.
Right. Because we're doing lots of education on that front right now as well. Long term, we'll have to figure out if we want to become a broker-dealer, and we haven't decided if we want to do that. Because if you're going to take fees off the back end, you have to be a registered broker-dealer. And I will stand here and tell you that I've never met a broker-dealer in my life that recommended I be a broker-dealer. And always tell me you don't want to be a broker-dealer. So that's why we don't quite jump down that path, and we just say, okay, let's work in some other way at this point.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Thank you.